Hey everyone, this is Gabe from Snorflyco, and today we'll be tying a Hare nymph. For the hook and the vise, we're using a filling mill FM5085 in a size 14. For the bead, we're also using a filling mill round tungsten bead in gold in a 3.2 millimeter. For thread, we're using a Veevus 8/0 in tan. For the body, we're using some Hareline dubbin in hare's ear. We're actually using a little bit of lead wire in 0.015. And for our tail and thorax, we're using a pheasant tail in either brown or a natural color. And then for our ribbing, we're using a little bit of ultra wire in size small in gold as well. So before we go ahead and start our thread on, we're going to take a little bit of our lead wire here. We're going to do probably 10 to 15 wraps of this stuff before we go ahead and do anything else. And the lead's super thin or super soft, so we can just go ahead and break it off right there at the end. We usually want to try to lay this little tag down, but we just cinch it all the way up as tight as we can right behind the bead, and that really locks that bead in place for us. It keeps it from moving around on us. Now with the thread, we're going to start right here behind the lead and trim this little piece off. And we're going to make a little thread dam right here behind the lead, and that'll keep that lead from moving and spinning around on us. So let's build up some thread right in here. It's also going to help us taper the body really nicely too. Now we got that little bit of thread dam in there. Go ahead and start wrapping our thread through the lead. Both ways, cover it up a little bit, and that's what we're looking for right there. Got a little bit of a taper going to it already. Now we'll go ahead and start with our tail. Pull about 4 or 5 barbs of our pheasant tail off. Try to keep the tips all lined up. Trim them. And now we'll go ahead and tie these guys in. We want the length of the tail to be somewhere between 1/2 and 1/4 of the length of the shank of the hook. So right about in there. And with the pheasant tail, you can usually do 1 or 2 light wraps to get them in place, and 2 light wraps on there right now. That length looks pretty good, but if I wanted to shorten it, just give these guys a little pull and shorten it up. Same thing if you need it longer. Just undo it a little bit, tie them back in. But if you start off too long, which is often the case, we can just shorten them up a little bit by pulling on with 2 loose wraps. Now it's about 1/4 length of the shank of the hook there. Get them chopped on. Now we're going to wrap this back up towards that thread dam we made just to keep our body consistent and help with our taper a little bit. Once we get right there behind the lead, we'll go ahead and trim this excess off, but we want to keep that because we'll use that later on in the fly. Now that we made it this far, we'll go ahead and tie in a little bit of our small gold thread and start that up here behind the bead. And just wrap this down towards the end, towards the tail. Kind of get that out of our way a little bit. And now we'll go ahead and dub on some of our hare's ear dubbing. You can dub it on just how it is, or if you want, you can use a little bit of wax. Just get a little bit on your finger, and then go ahead and wipe it on the thread. And then I'll just help noodle this natural dubbing on there a little bit nicer. It's not a necessity, but it can be a useful tool. But to kind of keep our taper going here nice and small, we'll just start with little small bits and add them on. Might add on a lot towards the end to try to build up the front of this fly a little bit, but we'll try to start thin because it's always easier to add more on if we need to than try to take some off. And again, it is possible to noodle this on there without the wax, but the wax will keep it a little bit tighter on there and a little bit easier to move around. Go ahead and start wrapping forward. But I've run out of dubbing here pretty quick, but that's okay. A little more wax on the thread for us. And because this material, there's dubbing, is more natural, it's easier to dub small chunks at a time than it is to throw a bunch on, because when you throw a lot on, it tends to just clump up on itself and not on your thread, and it can be kind of a pain to get it to work with you. It should be enough for the rest of the fly. Wrap forward. Now we're all good right there. We'll throw one whip finish in it to get our thread out of the way. Use our rotary function. Now go ahead and counter wrap. Alright, now that we're up front, we'll go ahead and tie that off. Now, with this being small wire, we can usually just pull forward and it'll pop right off. You can also helicopter it. Either way it'll work. And now, hopefully you didn't throw away our excess pheasant tail, because now we're going to go ahead and tie these guys in and make a little wing case on top of this fly. Tie them in right on top. And again, with these guys, you can tie them in a little long and then pull them down to where you want to get them. Even if one pops out, it's not a big deal. You can just go ahead and tie this guy right back in, line him up. Wrap back a little bit because we're trying to make a little thorax with the wing case right here. So we make that, we'll go ahead and use just a little more wax on our thread because we're using a little bit more dubbing. This one looks like a lot, but I got a pretty small noodle going, so we'll just do a lot of wraps. Bam. Now from here, we're going to fold these guys back forward on top. And just wrap one right over the top of it. Do a couple wraps behind. A couple wraps in front. And those guys should be secured on there. Go ahead and trim them. And now we can go ahead, you can discard those now, or if you're going to tie more, you're more welcome to keep them, use them again. We'll throw a couple whip finishes in here right behind the bead. Go ahead and trim our thread, and that is the Hare's ear.